You know that moment when your entire world shatters in front of a room full of strangers, and you're supposed to just smile and take it? That moment when someone looks you straight in the eye and strips away every ounce of dignity you thought you had, and everyone around you either laughs or looks away. I lived that moment. And let me tell you, what happened next, those 3 little words I whispered, changed everything. My name is Catherine, and I want to tell you about the day I walked into my husband's company anniversary party as his devoted wife of 12 years, and walked out as someone completely different. Someone I didn't even know I could be. It was a Friday evening in October. The kind of evening where the air has that crisp bite to it and the city lights start to twinkle just as the sun goes down. I'd spent 3 hours getting ready. 3 hours. My hair was swept up in an elegant chignon. I wore a burgundy dress, classic, tailored, expensive, the kind that whispers old money rather than screaming for attention. Pearl earrings, subtle makeup. I looked exactly like what I was supposed to be, the perfect executive wife. Marcus, my husband, had texted me that afternoon. "Don't be late tonight, Catherine. Important clients will be there. Look the part." Look the part. As if I ever didn't. As if I hadn't spent 12 years perfecting the role of Mrs. Marcus Wellesley, supporting his climb up the corporate ladder, hosting his business dinners, charming his clients, being the elegant, educated, sophisticated woman on his arm. Before we go any further, I need you to do something for me. Smash that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Because what I'm about to tell you, you won't believe it until you hear every single word. So there I was, walking into the Grand Meridian Hotel ballroom. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, waiters in crisp white jackets carrying trays of champagne. Marcus's company had just closed a massive merger, their biggest deal in 15 years, and this party was their victory lap. 200 people, maybe more. Executives, board members, department heads, their partners. I recognized most of them. I'd been to a dozen events just like this. Marcus spotted me from across the room. He was standing with a group of his team members, all holding drinks, all laughing at something. He gave me that smile. You know the one. The smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. The smile that says, "You're here, good, you're doing your job." He raised his glass slightly in my direction but didn't come over. Didn't introduce me to whoever he was talking to. Just acknowledged my presence like I was part of the Daker. I should have felt something then. Hurt, maybe. Disappointment. But honestly, I'd gotten so used to it that I just picked up a glass of champagne from a passing tray and started making small talk with Helen, the CFO's wife. We talked about the usual things. Renovations, vacation plans, charity galas, surface level, safe. About 20 minutes in, I excused myself to find Marcus. He was my husband, after all. We should at least look like a couple. I wove through the crowd, smiling, nodding, exchanging pleasantries, until I reached the corner where he stood. That's when I saw her. She was young, mid-20s maybe, blonde hair that fell in perfect beach waves over her shoulders, a dress that was just a touch too tight, too short, too shiny, red lips, confident smile. She was standing close to Marcus. Too close. Her hand resting casually on his forearm as she laughed at something one of the other men said. But it wasn't her proximity that made my stomach drop. It was the way Marcus looked at her. The way his eyes softened. The way he leaned in when she spoke. The way he was fully present with her in a way he hadn't been with me in years. I approached the group with my rehearsed smile firmly in place. "Hello, darling," I said, touching Marcus's shoulder lightly. He turned, and for just a fraction of a second I saw it. Annoyance, like I was interrupting something, but he recovered quickly, slipping into his public persona. "Catherine, there you are." He didn't kiss me, didn't pull me close, just acknowledged me. Again. "I wanted to congratulate you properly," I said warmly, playing my part. "This merger is incredible." "Thank you," he said, his tone polite but distant. Then, almost as an afterthought, he gestured to the woman beside him. "This is Arya. She's been instrumental in the deal, our new senior acquisitions specialist." Arya extended her hand and I took it. Her grip was firm, practiced. "Mrs. Wellesley," she said, her voice smooth as silk, "I've heard so much about you." "All good things, I hope," I replied with a gracious smile. "Of course." Her eyes traveled over me, head to toe, a quick assessment that felt more like a judgment. "Marcus speaks very highly of you." There was something in the way she said his name. Marcus, not Mr. Wellesley, not your husband, just Marcus, familiar, intimate. I pushed the thought away. I was being paranoid. This was a work event. These were his colleagues, professional relationships. I was reading into things. "Arya's being modest," one of the other men chimed in. "She practically sealed this deal single-handedly. Brilliant negotiator." "And she just turned 26, another added. "Youngest senior specialist the company's ever had." Arya laughed, a light tinkling sound. "You're all too kind." She glanced at Marcus, and they shared a look that lasted just a beat too long. My smile felt frozen on my face. "I need you to understand something about my marriage to really grasp what happened that night and everything that came after. Marcus and I weren't always like this. There was a time, years ago, when he looked at me the way he was looking at her. When I was the one he couldn't take his eyes off. When my voice was the one he leaned in to hear. We met in graduate school. I was getting my MBA at Stanford, and he was in the same program. I came from money, old family wealth, the kind that doesn't flash itself around. My father owned a successful investment firm, and I'd grown up in a world of private schools, country clubs, and expectations. Marcus came from a middle-class family in Ohio. His father was a high school teacher. His mother worked in a library. He was brilliant, ambitious, hungry for success in a way that I found intoxicating. He pursued me relentlessly, flowers on my desk, handwritten notes, long conversations in coffee shops that stretched until 2 in the morning. He told me I was different from other wealthy girls he'd met, that I was smart, grounded, real. He said I challenged him, inspired him. He said he was going to build an empire and he wanted me by his side. I fell completely, utterly in love with him. We got married 6 months after graduation. It was a beautiful wedding. My father paid for everything, of course. 300 guests at the family estate in Connecticut. Marcus looked at me like I was the only person in the world. I wore my grandmother's veil. I felt like a princess. The first few years were good, really good. We moved to New York. Marcus landed a position at a mid-sized investment firm, and I worked in corporate strategy at a consulting company. We had a small apartment in the city, and we were building our lives together. We'd stay up late talking about our dreams. He wanted to make partner before he was 35. I wanted to maybe start my own consulting practice eventually, or teach, or write. We talked about having children someday. A boy and a girl, maybe. A house in the suburbs with a big backyard. But then Marcus got his first big promotion. Senior associate. Longer hours, more pressure, more travel. I was supportive, of course. I encouraged him. When he came home stressed and exhausted, I'd have dinner waiting. I'd listen to him vent about office politics and difficult clients. I'd rub his shoulders and tell him how proud I was of him. Then came the next promotion. Vice president. Even longer hours, even more travel. By this point, we'd been married about 5 years. My own career had taken a backseat. I'd left my consulting job because the hours conflicted with his schedule and someone needed to manage our home life. Marcus was climbing fast, and he needed a wife who could host dinners, accompany him to events, make the right impression. So that's what I became. I told myself it was temporary, that once he made partner, things would slow down. We'd start our family, we'd reconnect. But when he made partner at 34, nothing changed. If anything, it got worse. More responsibility, more pressure. More evenings when he'd text saying he had to work late, don't wait up. More mornings when he'd leave before I woke up. More conversations that consisted of logistics rather than connection. I filled my time with other things. Charity work, book clubs, maintaining our home, which by then was a beautiful 4-bedroom house in Greenwich. I took art classes. I had lunch with friends. I stayed in shape. I kept myself busy. But I was lonely. God, I was so lonely. And I knew on some level that we'd drifted apart. That we'd become roommates more than lovers, that we were going through the motions of a marriage rather than actually living one. But I kept telling myself that this was normal, that this was what long-term marriage looked like, that the passion fades and what you're left with is partnership, companionship, mutual respect. I didn't want to admit that we didn't even have that anymore. Marcus had become someone different over those 12 years. The ambitious, warm, passionate man I'd married had turned into someone cold, calculating, always focused on the next deal, the next promotion, the next achievement. He looked at me like I was another asset he'd acquired. Valuable, perhaps, but not particularly interesting, not exciting. I stayed because I'd invested 12 years, because I'd given up my career for his, because divorce felt like failure, and I'd never failed at anything in my life. Because I still remembered who we used to be, and some pathetic part of me kept hoping we could find our way back to that. And maybe, if I'm being really honest, because I didn't know who I was anymore without him. I'd spent so long being Mrs. Marcus Wellesley that Catherine, whoever she was, had disappeared somewhere along the way. So when I stood in that ballroom, watching my husband look at a 26-year-old woman with more life in his eyes than I'd seen in years, something inside me cracked. Not broke. Not yet. Just cracked, like a windshield hit by a small stone. The damage looks minor at first, but you just know that it's going to spread. I excused myself from the group after a few more minutes of excruciating small talk. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to pull myself together. I made my way toward the ladies' room, champagne glass still in hand, smile still plastered on my face. Inside, I set down my glass and gripped the marble counter, staring at my reflection. I looked perfect. Hair still immaculate, makeup still flawless, dress still elegant, but my eyes looked empty. When had that happened? When had I become this hollow version of myself? I took a deep breath, touched up my lipstick, and gave myself a stern internal talking to. I was being ridiculous. So Marcus had an attractive young colleague. So what? That didn't mean anything. I was his wife. I was educated, accomplished, sophisticated. I had nothing to worry about. But even as I tried to convince myself, that crack inside me spread just a little bit wider. I managed to avoid Marcus and his little fan club for the next hour. I circulated, made conversation, laughed at appropriate moments, played my role perfectly. Several people complimented my dress. The CEO's wife and I had a lovely discussion about a fundraiser we were both involved with. On the surface, everything was fine. I was fine. But I couldn't stop my eyes from drifting back to where Marcus stood. And every single time I looked, she was there. Arya, laughing, touching his arm, whispering something that made him smile. And he was engaged in a way I hadn't seen in years, animated, present, alive. At one point, I watched as she reached up and adjusted his tie. It was a small gesture, casual, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And he let her. Didn't step back. Didn't create distance. Just let this young woman put her hands on him in a room full of colleagues and clients. And his wife. The crack spread wider. Around 9:30, the speeches started. The CEO thanked everyone for their hard work on the merger. He specifically called out Marcus and Arya as the driving forces behind the deal's success. They both went up to the front of the room to accept a symbolic award, some crystal thing that would end up on a shelf in Marcus's office. They stood together while everyone applauded. They looked like the perfect team. Young, attractive, successful, powerful. I clapped along with everyone else, my hands moving mechanically. When they came down from the platform, people swarmed them with congratulations. I stayed where I was, near the back of the room. Marcus didn't look for me, didn't seek me out to share the moment. I was irrelevant to his triumph. I decided then that I wanted to leave. I'd done my duty. I'd shown up, looked the part, played the perfect wife. I'd had enough. I wove through the crowd toward Marcus to tell him I was calling a car. He could stay as late as he wanted. I'd see him at home. But as I approached, I heard Arya's voice, pitched just loud enough to carry. "You know what I love about working with Marcus?" she was saying to a small group that had gathered around them. "He's forward-thinking. He's not stuck in the past. He embraces innovation, new ideas, new approaches. He's not afraid to leave behind what's outdated." Several people nodded in agreement. Someone said something about Marcus always being ahead of the curve. I was about 3 feet away when Arya's eyes landed on me, and I swear I saw something flicker in them, something calculating, something mean. She smiled at me. "Oh, Mrs. Wellesley, we were just talking about the importance of staying current in our industry, of not clinging to old methods that don't work anymore." Her eyes traveled over me again, that same assessing look from earlier. "It's so important to know when something has outlived its usefulness, don't you think?" The group had gone quiet. A few people looked uncomfortable. Marcus was looking at Arya with a slight frown, like he wasn't quite sure where she was going with this. But I knew. Oh, I knew exactly what she was doing. "Absolutely," I said smoothly, holding her gaze. "Recognizing when something no longer serves its purpose is crucial." "Exactly," she continued, emboldened. "I mean, there's a reason the company brought in fresh talent for this merger instead of relying on the same old guard. Sometimes you need a younger perspective. Someone with more energy, more creativity, more—" She paused, her smile sharpening, "more to offer." One of the women in the group, someone from HR, I think, looked genuinely shocked. Another man coughed awkwardly and suddenly became very interested in his drink. Marcus finally seemed to register that this conversation had taken an inappropriate turn. "Arya, I think." But she kept going. She was looking right at me now, and there was nothing subtle about it anymore. "I'm sure you understand, Mrs. Wellesley. After all, there comes a time when we all have to accept that we might be a bit—" She tilted her head, mock sympathy dripping from every word. "Outdated." The word hung in the air like poison. Outdated. She'd called me outdated, in front of my husband's colleagues, in front of people I'd known for years. She'd looked me in the eye and called me irrelevant, old, past my usefulness. And Marcus just stood there. He didn't defend me, didn't shut her down, didn't do anything except look vaguely uncomfortable, like this was an awkward situation he wished he wasn't involved in. That crack inside me, it finally broke wide open. But something else happened too. Something cold and clear flooded in through the break. Something sharp. Something that had been buried under 12 years of playing nice, staying quiet, being appropriate, being perfect. I looked at this smug little girl who thought she'd won something, who thought she could humiliate me, who thought I was some weak, pathetic, outdated wife who would just take it. And I smiled. Not a polite smile, not a society smile, a real smile, the kind that should have warned her. I stepped closer to her, close enough that the rest of the group couldn't quite hear, close enough that it was just her and me. And I whispered 3 words. 3 simple words that made every drop of color drain from her face. But before I tell you what those 3 words were, you need to understand how I got to that moment. How I went from being the perfect, composed wife to someone who could look another woman in the eye and watch her world start to crumble. Because that version of me, the one who whispered those words, she was born 3 weeks before that party. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Marcus had left for work early that morning, around 6. Nothing unusual about that. He'd been leaving early and coming home late for months. I'd stopped asking about it, stopped waiting up. We barely saw each other anymore, and when we did, our conversations were functional. "Did you pay the electric bill? I have a client dinner Thursday. The landscapers are coming Friday." We were strangers living in the same house. That Tuesday, I was having lunch with my friend Patricia. We'd known each other since college, and she was one of the few people in my life who knew the real me, not the perfect wife version, the actual me. We met at a small French bistro we loved, and over salads and white wine, she asked me the question I'd been avoiding. "Catherine, are you happy?" I remember pausing with my fork halfway to my mouth. "What do you mean?" "With Marcus, with your life. Are you actually happy?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to give her the standard answer. Of course I'm happy. I have a beautiful home, financial security, a successful husband. What more could I want? But something in Patricia's eyes told me she already knew the answer, and I was so tired of pretending. "No," I said quietly, "I don't think I am." Patricia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I didn't think so. You haven't seemed like yourself in a long time." We talked for 2 hours. I told her everything. How lonely I was, how disconnected Marcus and I had become, how I felt like I'd disappeared into the role of being his wife and forgotten who I actually was, How I sometimes looked at my life and couldn't figure out how I'd ended up here. "Have you thought about counseling?" Patricia asked. "Marriage therapy." "I suggested it 6 months ago," I admitted. "Marcus said we didn't need it, that we were fine, I was just being emotional." Patricia's expression darkened. "That's not okay, Catherine." "I know," I said. "But what am I supposed to do? I've invested 12 years into this marriage. I gave up my career for his. I've built my entire life around supporting him. If I walk away now, what do I have left?" "Yourself," Patricia said simply. "You'd have yourself back." I went home that afternoon with her words echoing in my head. The house was empty, quiet. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in the living room, thinking. Really thinking about my life, my marriage, my future. What did I actually want? Around 4 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Marcus's office line. I almost didn't answer. It was unusual for him to call from his desk, but something made me pick up. "Hello?" Silence. Then I heard voices in the background, Marcus's voice, and a woman's laugh. "Marcus," I said. No response. He hadn't meant to call me. It was a pocket dial, an accidental call. I should have hung up. But I didn't. I kept listening. "You're terrible," the woman's voice said, playful, flirtatious. "What if someone comes in?" "Everyone's in the conference room," Marcus replied. "We have time." My blood went cold. "I can't believe we're doing this," she said. "You're married." "Don't," Marcus said, and his voice had a warmth to it that I hadn't heard directed at me in years. "Don't think about that right now. This is different. This is real." "Is it?" Her voice was softer now, vulnerable. "Because sometimes I feel like I'm just your secret, like you're ashamed of me." "Never," Marcus said firmly. "You're the best thing that's happened to me in years. You make me feel alive again, young again." He paused, and I held my breath. "She doesn't understand me anymore. Hasn't for a long time. We're basically roommates at this point." "Then why don't you leave her?" Another pause, longer this time. "It's complicated. Her family has connections that have been valuable to my career, and a divorce would be messy, expensive. But I promise you, Arya, what we have is real. I just need more time to figure out the logistics." "Arya," her name was Arya. "I'm falling in love with you, Marcus," she whispered. "I know," he said. "I know, baby, me too." Then there were sounds I won't describe, but you can imagine. Sounds that told me exactly what was happening in my husband's office. I ended the call with shaking hands. Then I sat there in my perfect living room in my perfect house, and I finally let myself feel everything I'd been pushing down for months, maybe years. Rage, betrayal, humiliation, grief. But underneath all of that, something else. Something cold and clear. Clarity. Marcus was having an affair with someone named Arya, and he'd been lying to me, using me, while telling his mistress that I didn't understand him, that I was just a useful connection, a complication. I was outdated, already outdated to him, weeks before she'd said the word to my face. That night when Marcus came home at 9:30, I said nothing. I'd had 5 hours to think, to plan, to decide how to handle this. I greeted him normally, asked about his day. He said it was fine, busy, the usual. He didn't look guilty, didn't seem concerned. Why would he? He thought I was clueless, the perfect, trusting wife. I went upstairs and pretended to read while he showered. When he climbed into bed beside me, he kissed my forehead absently and rolled over, asleep within minutes. I lay there in the dark, listening to him breathe, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to fall apart. I was going to find out exactly what I was dealing with, and then I was going to decide what to do about it. Over the next 3 weeks, I became someone I'd never been before. I became a spy in my own marriage. I checked Marcus's credit card statements. There were charges at expensive restaurants on nights he'd said he was working late, hotel bars, flower deliveries I'd never received, a jewelry purchase from Tiffany's, something I'd never seen. I checked his phone when he was in the shower. He wasn't even careful about hiding it. Why would he be? I was his trusting, naive wife. I found messages to Arya, dozens of them, sweet messages, sexy messages, Messages planning when they could meet. Messages about how much he missed her. Messages calling her baby, sweetheart, my love. Messages about me. She's redecorating the guest room again. I swear she just needs something to do with her time. Another charity event tonight. So boring. Wish I was with you instead. Don't worry about her. It's you I want. Every message was a knife. But I didn't break. I took screenshots. I documented everything. I hired a private investigator. A discreet one that Patricia recommended. Within a week, he had photos. Marcus and Arya having lunch. Marcus and Arya leaving a hotel together. Marcus and Arya kissing in the parking garage of his office building. The investigator told me the affair had been going on for 4 months. That Arya had joined the company 6 months ago, and within 2 months, she and Marcus were involved. That she was ambitious, calculating, and very good at making herself indispensable to powerful men. She's done this before, he told me. At her last company, had an affair with a married VP. That relationship ended badly for her, some kind of scandal, which is why she moved to your husband's firm. I can dig deeper if you want. Yes, I said. Dig deeper. I want to know everything about her. At home, I continued to play the perfect wife. I smiled. I made dinner. I asked about Marcus's day. I went to the dry cleaners and picked up his suits. I planned our social calendar. I did everything exactly as I'd always done it. But inside, I was changing. That crack that had formed was letting out the old Catherine and letting in someone new, someone harder, someone who was done being used, done being dismissed, done being treated like an outdated accessory. Marcus announced the company anniversary party 2 weeks after I'd discovered the affair. Big event, he told me over breakfast. Important clients, make sure you look good. Of course, I said pleasantly. I always do. He didn't even look up from his phone. I went shopping that week. I bought the burgundy dress. Classic, elegant, expensive. The kind of dress that screamed old money and good breeding. The kind of dress that someone young and desperate like Arya could never quite pull off. She could wear tight and flashy, but she couldn't wear this kind of understated elegance. That required something she didn't have: class. I knew she'd be at the party. The investigator had told me she'd been heavily involved in the merger. Of course she had. Marcus probably gave her credit for work she barely did, just like he was crediting her with making him feel alive when all she was really doing was stroking his ego and his other parts. The night of the party, I dressed with care, every detail perfect. Hair, makeup, jewelry, dress. I looked in the mirror and saw exactly what I wanted to see. A woman who had it all together. A woman who couldn't be shaken. But I knew what was coming. I knew I'd have to see them together. See him look at her the way he used to look at me. See her touching him, laughing with him, being everything I apparently wasn't anymore. What I didn't know was that she'd have the audacity to come at me directly. When I arrived at the party and saw her for the first time, standing next to my husband with her hand on his arm, I felt that cold clarity sharpen into something almost surgical. She was pretty, I'd give her that. Young, blonde, confident in that way that only comes from never having been truly tested by life. She wore her sexuality openly, comfortably, like it was a weapon she knew how to wield. And Marcus was eating it up. I watched them for 20 minutes before I approached, watched how she touched him constantly, little touches, casual but constant, a hand on his arm, fingers brushing his shoulder, leaning in close to whisper something, each touch a small claim, mine, mine, mine. And he let her. Right there, in front of everyone, in front of colleagues who knew he was married, in front of people who knew me, he let this young woman drape herself over him like I didn't exist. When I finally walked over and inserted myself into their group, I saw the flash of annoyance on his face before he covered it, and I saw something else on hers. Triumph, like she'd won something. The introduction was pure poison wrapped in politeness. This is Arya. She's been instrumental in the deal. Not this is my colleague. Not this is someone I work with, but she's been instrumental. She's important. She matters. And the way she looked at me when we shook hands, like she was sizing up the competition and finding it lacking, like she already knew all my weaknesses because Marcus had told her, like she was just waiting for the right moment to strike. I managed to extricate myself after a few excruciating minutes of small talk. I needed to regroup, needed to remind myself why I was here. I wasn't here to confront them. Not yet. I was here to observe, to gather information, to confirm what I already knew. But watching them together for the next hour was torture. Every laugh, every touch, every private smile they shared, it was all confirmation. This wasn't just sex. This wasn't just an affair. He was in love with her, or at least he was in love with how she made him feel. Young, powerful, desired. And she was in love with what he could give her. Status, advancement, money, access to power. They deserved each other. When the speeches started and they went up together to accept their award, standing side by side while everyone applauded, I saw exactly how this looked to everyone else. The perfect partnership. Marcus and his brilliant young protege. The mentor and his star student. No one seemed to notice, or if they did, no one seemed to care that this was inappropriate. That his wife was standing in the back of the room, forgotten. Or maybe they did notice. Maybe they knew. Maybe everyone knew except stupid, clueless Catherine. That thought made the rage burn hotter. After the speeches, I decided I'd had enough. I'd done my duty. I was going to tell Marcus I was leaving, call a car, go home. I'd seen what I needed to see. Any remaining hope I might have had that this was just a fling, just a phase, just something that could be fixed, it died tonight. Tomorrow, I'd call a divorce lawyer. A good one. The best one. I'd use all those family connections Marcus valued so much. I'd take him for everything I could. I'd burn down the life we'd built and walk away from the ashes. But then I heard her voice. That light, confident voice, talking about forward thinking, about not being stuck in the past, about leaving behind what's outdated. And I knew she was talking about me. She was doing it deliberately. She wanted me to know. She wanted to humiliate me. She thought she'd already won, and this was her victory lap. When she looked right at me and said it, when she called me outdated to my face, I saw Marcus's reaction. Or rather, his lack of reaction. He didn't defend me, didn't stop her, didn't do anything except look mildly uncomfortable. And in that moment, I realized something. She didn't know. She thought she was so smart, so clever, so in control. She thought she'd won Marcus, that she was destroying his outdated wife, that she was getting everything she wanted. But she had no idea what was really going on. No idea what I knew. No idea what I was capable of. The private investigator I'd hired had given me his full report 2 days ago. Everything about Arya Chen, her background, her education, her employment history, her previous affair, and one very, very interesting piece of information that she'd worked very hard to keep hidden. Something that would destroy her if it came out. Something that would end her career, her relationship with Marcus, everything. The investigator had laid it all out in a manila folder. I don't usually editorialize, he'd said, but this woman is a piece of work. She's smart, I'll give her that. But she's been playing a dangerous game, and if the wrong people found out about this, he'd tap the folder, she'd be finished. I'd taken the folder home and read every word, and then I'd smiled. Really smiled, because Arya Chen had made a critical mistake. She'd assumed I was weak, powerless, just a discarded wife with no teeth. She had no idea who my family was, what connections I had, what resources I could access. She'd poked the wrong woman. So when she stood there, smug and triumphant, calling me outdated in front of all these people, I didn't crumble. I didn't cry. I didn't make a scene. I stepped close to her, close enough that only she could hear me, and I smiled. The 3 words I whispered to Arya Chen were simple, 3 words that held the weight of everything I knew, everything I'd discovered, everything that was about to come crashing down on her perfectly constructed house of cards. I leaned in close, still smiling that cold smile, and I whispered, "I know everything." That's it. That's all I said. I know everything. And I watched the color drain from her face like someone had pulled a plug. Her eyes went wide. Her mouth opened slightly. Her hand, which had been holding a champagne glass, started to shake. "What?" she breathed, so quietly I almost didn't hear it. I pulled back, my smile widening. You heard me. Around us, the rest of the group was starting to disperse, uncomfortable with the tension they'd witnessed. Marcus was talking to someone, distracted, not paying attention to our little sidebar conversation. Arya's face had gone from flushed and triumphant to absolutely pale. Her eyes were darting around, panicked, like she was looking for an escape route. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her voice shook. Don't you? I took a sip of my champagne, perfectly calm. I think you know exactly what I'm talking about, Arya. Or should I say Arya Chen? Or wait, I'm sorry, do you prefer your real name? The one you were using at your last job? If possible, she went even paler. I have to go, she stammered. Of course, I said graciously. But before you do, you should know that I have a very important meeting scheduled for Monday morning with the board of directors. I'm going to be sharing some fascinating information about the company's newest senior acquisitions specialist. I'm sure they'll be very interested to hear all about it. You can't, she whispered, and now there was genuine fear in her eyes. You don't understand. You'll ruin everything. That's the point, sweetheart. I let that last word drip with condescension. You thought you could humiliate me. You thought you could take my husband, mock me to my face, and there would be no consequences. You thought I was just some outdated, powerless wife who would roll over and let you destroy my life. Tears were forming in her eyes now, actual tears. Please, you don't know what you're doing. If this comes out, it's not just me who gets hurt. Oh, I know exactly who gets hurt, I said softly. That's why I'm doing it. Marcus chose that moment to turn back toward us. Everything okay here? Arya looked at him with something like desperation, but she couldn't say anything. Not here, not now, not without revealing everything. Fine, she managed, her voice tight. I need some air. She practically fled toward the bathroom. Marcus watched her go with a slight frown. What was that about? I shrugged elegantly. I have no idea. Maybe the champagne didn't agree with her. She seems a bit upset. He looked at me then, really looked at me, maybe for the first time all evening. Something in my expression must have registered because his frown deepened. Catherine, did you say something to her? Me, I raised my eyebrows in innocent surprise. What would I possibly have to say to your colleague, darling? We barely know each other. I paused, letting that sink in. Although she did have some interesting opinions about things being outdated, I found that fascinating. Such passion about getting rid of old things that no longer serve a purpose. Marcus had the grace to look uncomfortable. She was talking about business strategies. Was she? I met his eyes directly. Are you sure about that? For just a second, I saw something flicker in his expression. Uncertainty, maybe even fear, like he was suddenly wondering exactly how clueless his wife actually was. I'm going to get another drink, I said pleasantly. Can I get you anything? No, I'm fine. Of course you are. I touched his cheek briefly, a gesture that might have looked affectionate to anyone watching but carried an edge he definitely felt. You're always fine, aren't you, Marcus? I walked away, feeling his eyes on my back. Let him wonder. Let him start to sweat. I made my way to the bar and ordered another champagne. My hands were steady. My heart was racing, but not from fear, from power, from the absolute rush of watching Arya's face crumble, of watching her realize that she'd made a terrible, terrible mistake. Patricia had called me yesterday. Are you sure you want to do this? She'd asked. Once you start this, there's no going back. I'm sure, I'd told her. I'm done being the victim in my own life. Good, she'd said. It's about time. But Catherine, be careful. When you set out for revenge, dig 2 graves. I know, I'd replied. I've already picked out the headstones. Now, standing at the bar, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror behind the bottles of liquor. I looked composed, elegant, in control. But my eyes had a hardness to them that hadn't been there before. That old Catherine, the one who just wanted to be loved, who tried so hard to be perfect, who bent herself into shapes to please her husband, she was gone. This new Catherine, she had teeth. I saw Arya emerge from the bathroom about 10 minutes later. Her makeup was fixed, but her eyes were red. She looked around frantically until she spotted Marcus. She made a beeline for him, grabbed his arm, and pulled him aside. I couldn't hear what they were saying from where I stood, but I could see their body language. She was upset, gesturing, her face pleading. He looked confused, then alarmed, then angry. His eyes cut to me across the room. I raised my champagne glass in a small salute and smiled. He said something sharp to Arya. She shook her head frantically. He looked around, clearly aware that people were starting to notice their intense conversation. He grabbed her elbow and steered her out of the ballroom, probably looking for somewhere private to talk. Perfect. I gave them 5 minutes, then I followed. I found them in a small conference room down the hall. The door wasn't quite closed. I could hear their voices, urgent and angry. "What did you say to her?" Marcus was demanding. "Nothing, I made a comment about outdated business practices and she got weird," Arya said. "But Marcus, she knows, I don't know how, but she knows, about us, about everything." "That's impossible. Catherine doesn't know anything. She's completely oblivious." "No, she's not. She told me she knows everything. She said she has a meeting with the board on Monday. She's going to tell them about me, about my past, about—" "What past?" Marcus's voice was sharp now. "What are you talking about?" There was a pause. Then Arya said in a small voice, "There are some things I didn't tell you, about my last job, about why I really left." "What things?" There was a situation with a married executive. We were involved and I may have borrowed some company funds for personal use. Nothing major, just a short-term loan that I was going to pay back, but his wife found out about the affair and she dug into everything and found the money and threatened to report me. So I left before it became an official investigation. They agreed not to pursue it if I just disappeared. "You embezzled money." Marcus's voice was ice cold now. "No, it wasn't like that. It was just a temporary thing, and I've been clean ever since. But if your wife tells the board, if they start digging into my background, if they find out—" "You lied to me about all of it." "I didn't lie, I just didn't tell you everything. It doesn't matter, Marcus. What matters is that your wife is trying to destroy me. You have to stop her." "How exactly am I supposed to do that?" "I don't know, she's your wife. Make her stop. Tell her the affair is over. Tell her you're staying with her. Tell her whatever she wants to hear." There was a long silence. Then Marcus said quietly, "The affair is over." "What?" Arya's voice cracked. "You lied to me. You committed fraud at your last company. If Catherine goes to the board with this, it doesn't just destroy you. It destroys me too. I brought you into this company. I vouched for you. I gave you credit for work on the biggest deal of my career. If it comes out that you're a fraud and we're sleeping together, my reputation is finished. So that's it. You're just going to throw me away. You should have been honest with me from the beginning. I love you." "No, you love what I could do for you. And honestly, Arya, I'm starting to think that's all this ever was for both of us." I heard footsteps moving toward the door and quickly stepped back into an alcove. Marcus emerged, his face dark with anger. He strode back toward the ballroom without looking back. A moment later, I heard sobbing from the conference room. Deep, broken sobs. I almost felt sorry for her, almost. But then I remembered her smug face when she called me outdated. I remembered all those text messages where she and Marcus laughed about me. I remembered being dismissed and humiliated and treated like I was worthless. And I didn't feel sorry for her at all. I walked back to the ballroom, my head high, my smile perfect. The real revenge hadn't even started yet. The rest of the party passed in a strange blur. I moved through the crowd, smiling, chatting, playing my role perfectly, while internally I was electric with anticipation. Marcus came back into the ballroom about 10 minutes after his conversation with Arya. His face was composed, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. He got himself a drink, a scotch, straight, and downed half of it in one go. Arya returned about 20 minutes later. Her makeup was repaired again, but she couldn't hide the devastation in her eyes. She kept her distance from both Marcus and me, sticking to the opposite side of the room. A few colleagues approached her with congratulations on the merger, and she managed weak smiles, but the triumphant glow from earlier was completely gone. She looked like someone who just watched their entire world start to crumble. Good. Around 11, Marcus appeared at my side. "We should go," he said curtly. "Of course, darling." I set down my champagne glass and collected my clutch. "Let me just say goodbye to a few people." "Catherine," his voice was low, urgent. "Now." I looked at him with wide, innocent eyes. "Is something wrong?" His jaw clenched. "We need to talk at home." "All right." I let him guide me toward the exit, aware of eyes following us. Let them watch. Let them wonder. In the car, Marcus was silent. His hands gripped the steering wheel too tight, his knuckles white. I sat in the passenger seat, serene, watching the city lights blur past the window. Finally, about halfway home, he spoke. "What did you say to Arya?" "I told you, darling, nothing of consequence. Why?" "Don't play games with me, Catherine. She's upset. She said you threatened her." "Threatened her?" I turned to look at him, my expression perfectly shocked. "That's a strong word. What exactly did she say I threatened her with?" He didn't answer immediately. We both knew why. Because Arya couldn't tell him what I'd actually said without revealing that she had secrets to hide. "She said you told her you were meeting with the board." "And? Are you?" I smiled. "I might be. I do have connections with several board members. My father plays golf with the CEO. My uncle serves on the Financial Oversight Committee. Is there a reason I shouldn't talk to them?" Marcus's face was turning red. "What are you trying to do?" "I'm not trying to do anything, Marcus. I'm just thinking about getting more involved with the company. You've always said I should take an interest in your work. Maybe I could volunteer for the charitable foundation. Or perhaps I could share some insights about employee conduct with the board. I'm sure they'd be interested to hear about workplace culture, professional boundaries, that sort of thing." The car swerved slightly. Marcus corrected it, breathing hard. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" I kept my voice light, conversational. "I think I know more than you realize, darling." "Catherine, how long have you been sleeping with her, Marcus?" The question hung in the air like a bomb. Marcus's hands tightened even more on the wheel. His face went from red to pale. "I don't know what." "Please don't insult my intelligence. Not now. Not after 12 years of marriage. At least give me the respect of honesty." He was silent for a long moment. Then quietly, 4 months. Something twisted in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. 4 months, and you love her. "I don't know, maybe. She makes me feel alive, young, excited." I filled in the blanks. "Yes, I heard." His head snapped toward me. "You heard." "You pocket-dialed me 3 weeks ago. From your office. I heard quite a lot." The car swerved again. Marcus pulled over abruptly, parking on the side of the road. He turned to face me, and for the first time in years, I had his complete attention. 3 weeks! You've known for 3 weeks." "Yes." "And you said nothing." What was I supposed to say, Marcus? Beg you to stop? Plead with you to love me again? Cry and scream and make a scene? I shook my head. "I've spent 12 years making myself into exactly what you wanted, the perfect wife. Elegant, educated, connected, supportive. I gave up my career for you. I organized my entire life around your needs. And you know what I realized? It was never enough, because the problem wasn't me. It was you. Catherine, you got bored. You wanted something new, something exciting. So you found a 26-year-old who's impressed by your title and your money and your power. Someone who doesn't know you well enough to see through the performance yet. Someone who thinks you're sophisticated and successful instead of seeing what you really are." "And what's that?" His voice was hard now, defensive. "A middle-aged man having a cliché affair with a young employee because it makes you feel important." I said it calmly, matter-of-factly. "You're not special, Marcus. This story is as old as time. Successful man gets everything he thought he wanted, realizes he's still not happy, so he blames his wife and finds a younger woman who temporarily makes him forget that the emptiness is coming from inside him. That's not fair. Isn't it? Tell me, in all those conversations with Arya, did you ever mention that you were the one who pushed me to quit my job? That you were the one who said we didn't need 2 careers, that your work had to come first? That every time I tried to talk to you about feeling disconnected, you told me I was being needy and emotional. Marcus looked away. I didn't realize you were so unhappy. You didn't want to realize it, because then you'd have to actually do something about it. It's easier to just paint me as the boring, outdated wife who doesn't understand you. So what now? He asked. You're going to destroy Arya's career out of revenge. I laughed, actually laughed. You think this is about revenge? Marcus, this is about consequences. Arya committed fraud at her last company. She lied on her employment application. She's been sleeping with her married boss and taking credit for work she may not have done. Those are all things that the board should know about, don't you think? Especially since you gave her such a prominent role in your biggest deal. If this comes out, it hurts me too. I know. He stared at me. You want to destroy both of us. I want the truth to come out. What happens after that is up to the board, the company, and the consequences of your choices. I smoothed my dress, perfectly calm. You can start the car now. I'd like to go home. Marcus sat there for another moment, breathing hard, his face a mixture of anger and something that might have been fear. Then he pulled back onto the road. We didn't speak for the rest of the drive. When we got home, Marcus went straight to his study and closed the door. I heard him on the phone, his voice muffled but urgent. Calling Arya, probably, or maybe a lawyer. It didn't matter. I went upstairs, took off my dress, removed my jewelry, and got ready for bed with the same calm precision I brought to everything. In the mirror, I looked at myself, really looked, and for the first time in years. I didn't see someone trying to be perfect. I saw someone who was taking back her power. I slept better that night than I had in months. The next morning was Saturday. I woke early, made coffee, and sat in the breakfast nook with my laptop and the manila folder the investigator had given me. Marcus was still asleep, or pretending to be. Either way, he wasn't downstairs. I opened the folder again and reviewed everything I knew about Arya Chen. The investigator had been thorough, almost frighteningly so. Arya was 26, from Los Angeles originally. Good student, decent university, nothing spectacular. She'd graduated 5 years ago and started working at a mid-sized investment firm in San Francisco. That's where she'd met James Rothman, a vice president, married 2 kids. They'd had an affair that lasted about 8 months. During that affair, Arya had access to discretionary funds for client entertainment. She'd used those funds for personal expenses. Shopping, trips, expensive dinners that weren't actually client-related. Nothing massive, about $30,000 over the course of several months, but enough to be considered embezzlement. When James's wife found out about the affair, she hired her own investigator. A very good one. He found the financial discrepancies and threatened to report Arya to both the company and the authorities. Arya panicked. James, trying to save his own marriage and career, threw her under the bus completely. Told his wife the affair meant nothing, that Arya had seduced him, that he'd had no idea about the money. The company gave Arya a choice. Resign quietly, pay back the money over time, and they wouldn't press charges or report it. Or they'd make it official and she'd face criminal charges. She took the deal, paid back the $30,000 from her savings and some family money, and left San Francisco. She'd moved to New York 6 months later and applied to Marcus's firm. On her application and in her interviews, she'd said she left her previous job for better opportunities, and listed James Rothman as a reference, knowing he'd give her a good review to avoid his wife finding out he was still in contact with his former mistress. The firm never dug deeper. Why would they? She had a clean resume, good education, excellent interview skills, and a glowing reference from a VP at a respected company. But she'd lied. By omission, by misdirection, but she'd lied. And if the company found out, it would be immediate termination and possible legal action for fraud. That wasn't even the best part. The investigator had also found something else. Something Arya definitely didn't want anyone to know. She was married. Not currently, but she'd been married at 23, right out of college, to a man named David Chen. The marriage lasted less than a year. They'd divorced quietly, and Arya had gone back to using her maiden name professionally while keeping Chen legally because, According to the investigator, it sounded more exotic and memorable than her actual maiden name, which was Johnson. Why did this matter? Because in all her conversations with Marcus, all her tearful declarations about falling in love with him, all her questions about when he'd leave his wife, she'd never once mentioned that she'd been married herself. She'd presented herself as this young, naive woman who was falling in love for the first time with a complicated man. But she wasn't naive. She knew exactly what she was doing. She'd done it before and she'd do it again. Marcus was just her latest mark, her latest stepping stone. I almost wanted to tell him just to watch his face when he realized he wasn't special to her either, that he was just a means to an end. But I had bigger plans. Around 10, Marcus finally emerged from his study. He looked like he hadn't slept. Good. "We need to talk," he said. "I'm listening." He sat down across from me at the breakfast table. "What do you want, Catherine?" "What do I want?" I closed my laptop. "I want to know why I wasn't enough. I want to know when you stopped loving me. I want to know if you ever actually loved me or if I was just a good strategic match. I want to know how you could lie to my face for 4 months. I want to know how you could let your mistress insult me in public and not say a word. I want a lot of things, Marcus, but I'm not sure you can give me any of them. I did love you, I do love you, it's just complicated." "No, it's actually very simple. You wanted something else, someone else. And instead of being honest with me, instead of suggesting counseling or separation or divorce, you just went ahead and had an affair. You made me look like a fool." "No one knows." "Everyone knows." My voice rose for the first time. "You think people at your company don't talk, don't notice? You think they didn't see how Arya looked at you last night, how she touched you, how you looked at her? Everyone knows, Marcus. They're just too polite to say it to my face. I'm the pathetic wife who can't keep her husband interested." "That's not true." "Isn't it? What did you tell Arya about me? That I'm boring, that I don't understand you, that I'm just there for the connections and the social status. I heard you, Marcus. I heard you tell her that we're basically roommates, that she makes you feel alive." He had the grace to look ashamed. I was wrong to say those things. "Were you wrong to say them, or wrong to get caught saying them?" He didn't answer. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice calm again. "I have information about Arya that the board needs to know. Information about fraud, about lies on her employment application, about her history. I'm going to share that information. Not because I'm vindictive, but because it's the truth and they deserve to know who they're trusting with important deals. It will destroy her career. Yes, it probably will. And it will damage mine. Yes, it probably will. So you're willing to burn everything down." I stood up, gathering my laptop and the folder. "You already burned it down, Marcus. You burned down our marriage. You burned down my trust. You burned down 12 years of partnership. I'm just making sure everyone can see the flames." "What about us? Is there any way to fix this?" I looked at him, really looked at him. This man I'd loved so much. This man I'd built my entire life around. And I felt nothing, no love, no hate, just a cool, clear nothing. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Right now, I don't even know if I want to try." I left him sitting there and went upstairs to my office. I had emails to send, calls to make. The meeting with the board was scheduled for Monday morning, but there were other people who needed to know first. People who could apply pressure. People who could make sure that when the truth came out, it wouldn't be swept under the rug or quietly managed. My father, for instance, who served on the advisory council and had significant influence with the CEO. My uncle, who chaired the ethics committee. Patricia's husband, who was a senior partner at the law firm that represented the company. I'd spent 12 years building and maintaining these connections for Marcus's benefit. Time to use them for my own. I started with my father. I called him and asked if we could have lunch, just the two of us. There were some things I needed to discuss about Marcus's company. "Is everything all right, Catherine?" he asked, concern in his voice. "Not really, Dad, but it will be." Sunday passed in cold silence. Marcus stayed in his study most of the day. I heard him on the phone multiple times. I didn't care who he was talking to or what he was planning. I had my own plans. I met my father for lunch at his club. We sat in a private corner and I told him everything. The affair, Arya's history, the fraud, the lies, Marcus's role in promoting her despite their relationship. All of it. My father listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with each revelation. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Do you want to save your marriage?" he finally asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "Right now, I want justice. I want the truth to come out. I want consequences for what they did after that. I don't know." He nodded slowly. "And you have proof, documentation." I handed him a folder, a copy of everything the investigator had found. He flipped through it, his expression grim. "This is thorough. I hired the best. The board meeting is tomorrow." "Yes, 10 a.m. My father closed the folder. "I'll be there, and I'll make sure the right questions get asked." "Thank you, Dad." He reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm sorry, Catherine. Sorry this happened to you. Sorry I didn't see it. You've always seemed so happy, so perfect together." "That's because I got very good at pretending." I squeezed his hand. "But I'm done pretending now." After lunch, I met with Patricia. We went for a walk in Central Park, bundled against the October chill. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "Honestly, I feel free. Like I've been carrying this enormous weight for years and I finally put it down." "No regrets about what you're doing?" "None. They made their choices. Now they get to live with the consequences." "What about Marcus? Do you think he'll fight back?" "I don't know. Maybe. But he doesn't have a lot of ground to stand on. He had an affair with a subordinate who committed fraud. Even if he didn't know about the fraud initially, once it comes out, his judgment is going to be questioned. Why did he promote her so quickly? Why did he give her so much credit for the merger? Was it merit or was it because they were sleeping together?" Patricia nodded. "The board is going to have to investigate. They won't have a choice." "Exactly." "And Arya?" "Arya will be fired, probably blacklisted. Might face legal action depending on what the company decides to do." "You're sure you want to do this to another woman? I know what she did was horrible, but her career will be over." I stopped walking and turned to face Patricia. "She didn't just have an affair with my husband. She embezzled money from her last company. She lied on her employment application. She took credit for work that might not have been hers. She insulted me in public, called me outdated to my face, tried to humiliate me, and she knew exactly what she was doing. This isn't her first time doing this. She's a predator, Patricia. She targets married men in power, uses them to advance her career, and moves on when it's convenient. I'm not destroying an innocent woman. I'm exposing someone who's been playing a corrupt game." Patricia studied my face. "You've changed." "Yes, I have. I think I like this version of you better." I smiled. "So do I." That evening, I had one more conversation to have, with Arya. I'd gotten her personal number from Marcus's phone weeks ago. I texted her from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at the Gramercy Park Hotel bar at 8. Come alone. Tell no one. If you don't show up, everything goes to the board tomorrow with no chance for you to explain your side." I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. She'd know who it was from. I arrived at the hotel bar at 7:45 and took a corner table. Ordered a glass of wine. Waited. Arya arrived at 8 on the dot. She looked terrible. No makeup, hair in a messy ponytail, wearing jeans and an oversized sweater. Her eyes were red and swollen. She saw me and walked over slowly, like she was approaching her own execution. "Sit," I said. She sat. "Do you want a drink?" "No." "Suit yourself." I took a sip of my wine. "Do you know why I asked you here?" "To gloat." Her voice was bitter. "No, to give you a choice." Her eyes flicked up to meet mine. "What kind of choice?" "Tomorrow morning, the board is going to hear about your history, about San Francisco, about James Rothman, about the $30,000, about the lies on your application. They're going to investigate, and when they do, they're going to fire you, probably pursue legal action. You'll be blacklisted from the industry. Your career will be over before it really started. Tears started rolling down her cheeks. I know. But there's another option. What option? I leaned forward. You resign. Tomorrow morning, first thing, you go to HR and you resign. You cite personal reasons. You offer to help with transition for your projects. You leave quietly and professionally. And then what? And then I don't go to the board. The information stays private. You can move on, start over somewhere else, maybe in a different industry where your past won't follow you. She stared at me. Why would you do that? Because despite what you might think, I'm not a monster. I don't enjoy destroying people. But I also won't let you get away with what you did without consequences. So this is your consequence. You lose Marcus, you lose this job, you lose the career path you were trying to build. But you don't lose everything. You get a chance to start over. What about Marcus? What about him? Are you going to divorce him? I smiled coldly. That's none of your concern. He doesn't love you, he told me. I don't care what he told you, Arya. I really don't. Marcus says what people want to hear. To you, he said I was boring and outdated and he was going to leave me. To me, he said you meant nothing and it was over. The truth is probably somewhere in between, and frankly, it doesn't matter anymore. You don't understand. We love each other. No, you don't. You love what he could do for your career. He loves how you made him feel. That's not love, that's transaction. And now the transaction is over. She was crying harder now. This isn't fair. You're right, it's not fair. It wasn't fair when you targeted my husband. It wasn't fair when you lied to get your job. It wasn't fair when you called me outdated in front of everyone. Life isn't fair, Arya. But sometimes, just sometimes, actions have consequences. This is one of those times. I stood up, dropping cash on the table for my wine. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow to resign. If you don't, I go to the board at 10 with everything I have. Your choice. I started to walk away, then turned back. And Arya, if you ever try to contact Marcus again, if you ever try to come back into our lives, I won't be this generous again. Are we clear? She nodded, her face crumpling. I left her there, crying into her hands at a hotel bar, her entire carefully constructed world falling apart. And I felt nothing but cold, clear satisfaction. Monday morning arrived with gray skis and the threat of rain. I woke at 6, showered and dressed with the same care I'd taken for the party. But this time I wasn't dressing to play a role. I was dressing as armor. A sharp black suit, tailored perfectly. My grandmother's pearls. Hair pulled back in a sleek bun, minimal makeup except for a bold red lip. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman ready for war. Marcus was already awake. I could hear him moving around in the guest room where he'd been sleeping since Saturday night. I went downstairs, made coffee, and waited. He appeared 20 minutes later, also dressed for work. We stood in the kitchen, two strangers in expensive clothes, not looking at each other. Did you meet with her? He asked finally. With Arya. Yes. And I gave her a choice. Resign quietly this morning, or face the board and everything that comes with it. Marcus set down his coffee mug with a sharp click. You can't do this, Catherine. I already did. If she resigns, people will ask questions. If the board investigates my career. Your career will survive or it won't. That's not my problem anymore. Not your problem, his voice rose. We built this life together. Everything we have is because of my career, this house, our lifestyle, everything. No, Marcus. Everything we have is because of your career and my family's money and connections. Don't forget which one of us came from wealth. Don't forget who introduced you to half the people who helped you climb that ladder. You built your career on my back, and now you're upset that I'm not willing to protect you from the consequences of your choices. I made a mistake. I had an affair. People do it all the time. It doesn't have to destroy everything. You're right, it doesn't, but you didn't just have an affair. You fell in love with someone who was using you. You gave her promotions and credit and access she hadn't earned. You let her mock your wife in public. You chose her over me, over our marriage, over everything we built. And you did it while telling me I was being emotional when I said we needed counseling. So no, Marcus, this isn't just about an affair. This is about you being willing to destroy our marriage and then expecting me to protect you from the fallout. He stared at me and I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes. Fear. Real, genuine fear. What do you want from me? An apology? Fine, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I was selfish and stupid and wrong. Is that what you want to hear? I want you to understand that this isn't something you can fix with words. This isn't a business deal where you can negotiate your way out. You broke something, Marcus. Something that can't be repaired with apologies. So that's it. 12 years of marriage and you're just done. I picked up my purse and car keys. I have a meeting this morning with my lawyer. We can discuss what happens next after I hear what Arya decides to do. Catherine, please. But I was already walking out the door. I drove to the city in silence, my hands steady on the wheel. No music, no podcasts, just the quiet hum of the engine and my own thoughts. I felt calm, eerily calm, like I was moving through water, everything slow and clear and inevitable. At 8:30, my phone rang. Unknown number, I answered. Mrs. Wellesley, a young woman's voice, not Arya, someone from HR maybe. Yes. This is Jennifer Kim from Human Resources at Wellesley and Associates. I'm calling because we received a resignation letter this morning from Arya Chen, effective immediately. She listed you as someone to contact regarding transition of her projects. I wanted to confirm. I'm not with the company, I said. I think there must be a mistake. Oh, I'm sorry, she specifically mentioned. Well, never mind. Thank you for your time. She hung up. I sat there in my parked car, phone still in my hand. Arya had resigned. She'd actually done it. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Part of me had expected her to fight, to call my bluff, to show up at the office and dare me to follow through. But she hadn't. She'd folded. She'd taken the out I'd given her and run. Smart girl. At least she was smart enough to know when she'd lost. My phone rang again, this time Marcus. She resigned. His voice was tight. I heard. HR is asking questions. Why she left so suddenly. Why she listed you as a contact. What did you tell them? Nothing yet. I said I didn't know. But Catherine, they're going to investigate anyway. Her leaving like this, right after the big merger celebration, it looks suspicious. The board is going to want answers. Then you better figure out what you're going to tell them. What am I supposed to say? That my wife threatened her into resigning? You can tell them whatever you want, Marcus. You can tell them the truth, that you had an affair with a subordinate, and when I found out, she decided to leave. Or you can lie and try to cover it up and hope no one digs deeper. Your choice. But either way, this is your mess to clean up, not mine. I hung up before he could respond. At 9:15, I walked into the offices of Patterson and Gray, one of the most prestigious divorce law firms in New York. I had an appointment with Margaret Patterson herself, the founding partner. Patricia's husband had made the introduction. Margaret was in her early 60s, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, elegant. She reminded me of my mother. We shook hands, and she gestured for me to sit. Mrs. Wellesley, thank you for coming in. I understand from Thomas that you're considering your options regarding your marriage. Yes, my husband has been having an affair. I discovered it 3 weeks ago. I've documented everything. I also discovered that the woman he was involved with has a history of fraud and ethical violations that I brought to light. She resigned from his company this morning. Margaret's eyebrows rose slightly. I see, and you're here because... Because I need to understand what a divorce would look like, what I'm entitled to, what my options are. Have you been married long? 12 years. Children? No. Do you work? Not currently. I left my career about 7 years ago to support my husband's advancement. Margaret nodded, making notes. And I understand you come from considerable family wealth. Yes, though most of my family's assets are in trusts and separate property. The house we live in was purchased with both marital funds and a gift from my father. My husband's income is substantial, but a significant portion of his success is due to connections and opportunities provided through my family. Did you sign a prenuptial agreement? No, Marcus didn't want one. He said it showed a lack of faith in our marriage. Margaret smiled slightly. How convenient for him, and now you have documentation of adultery. Photographs, text messages, financial records showing expenditures for gifts and hotels, testimony from a private investigator. Yes. Then, Mrs. Wellesley, if you decide to pursue divorce, you're in an excellent position. New York is a no-fault divorce state, but adultery can still be relevant for certain aspects of the proceedings. Given the length of your marriage, your sacrifice of career, and the adultery, you would likely be entitled to a significant portion of marital assets, possibly spousal maintenance, and given his behavior, the court would look favorably on your claims. What kind of timeline are we looking at? If it's uncontested, we could finalize everything in 6 months to a year. If he fights, it could take longer. But given the evidence you have, most attorneys would advise him not to fight. And if I don't file, if I wait? That's entirely your choice. Some people need time to process. To decide if the marriage is truly over, there's no rush. The evidence isn't going anywhere. I nodded slowly. I need to think about it. Of course, take all the time you need. When and if you decide to move forward, we'll be ready. I left the law office feeling strangely lighter. Just knowing my options, knowing I had a path forward if I wanted it, that was power. I didn't have to decide today. I didn't have to decide tomorrow. But I could decide whenever I was ready. That choice was mine. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. Board meeting postponed. Arya Chen resigned this morning. Company investigating circumstances of her departure and her role in the merger. Marcus being questioned about his professional judgment. Thought you should know. So it was happening. Even without me going to the board directly, Arya's sudden resignation had triggered exactly what I'd predicted. An investigation. Questions. Scrutiny of Marcus's decisions. The truth was coming out, one way or another. Another text came through. This one from a number I didn't recognize. I did what you asked. I resigned. I'm leaving New York. Please, I'm begging you, don't give them the file. Let me disappear. I'll never contact Marcus again. I'll never work in this industry again. Just please let this be over. Arya, pleading, desperate. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back. As long as you keep your word and stay gone, your secrets stay with me. But if you ever come back, if you ever try to reach out to Marcus, if I even hear your name again, I won't hesitate. Are we clear? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally. Yes, we're clear. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I really am sorry. I didn't respond. There was nothing more to say. Sorry didn't fix what she'd broken. Sorry didn't undo the humiliation, the betrayal, the pain. But at least she was gone. That was something. I drove home slowly, taking the long way, thinking about everything that had happened in the past 3 weeks. How much had changed. How much I had changed. 3 weeks ago, I was the perfect wife. Elegant, supportive, silent. I swallowed my loneliness and told myself this was what marriage looked like. I made myself smaller to make Marcus feel bigger. Now I was someone different, someone who knew her worth, someone who didn't accept disrespect, someone who fought back. When I got home, Marcus's car was in the driveway. He was home early. That was unusual. I walked inside and found him in the living room, sitting on the couch with his head in his hands. He looked up when I entered, and I was shocked to see tears on his face. They're investigating me, he said hoarsely. The board. They want to know about my relationship with Arya, whether it influenced my professional decisions, whether I showed favoritism. The CEO called me into his office this morning. Catherine, they're talking about suspension pending investigation. They might ask me to resign. I set down my purse carefully. What did you tell them? The truth, that we had a relationship, that it was wrong, that it started after I promoted her, not before, so it didn't influence that decision, that I ended it this weekend when I found out she'd lied about her background. And they believed you. I don't know. They're bringing in an outside firm to investigate. They're going to interview everyone she worked with, review all the merger documents, look at every decision I made. Catherine, this could destroy everything I've built. I know. He looked at me, really looked at me. You're not going to help me, are you? You're going to let me burn. What do you want me to do, Marcus? Lie for you. Tell the board that everything's fine, that you showed excellent judgment. Stand by your side and play the supportive wife while you try to minimize what you did. I want you to remember that we're married, that we're supposed to be a team. We stopped being a team when you decided to sleep with someone else. You don't get to play the marriage card now when it's convenient for you. He stood up angry now. So this is it. This is your revenge, destroying my career. I didn't destroy your career, Marcus. You did. You made the choices. You had the affair. You promoted your mistress. You let your personal feelings cloud your professional judgment. These are consequences of your actions, not my revenge. If you hadn't threatened Arya, she wouldn't have resigned. If she hadn't resigned, no one would be investigating. If you hadn't had an affair, there would be nothing to investigate. We stood there, facing each other across the living room. Two people who used to love each other. Two people who'd promised forever. Two people who'd become strangers. I lost everything, he said quietly. I lost you. I lost Arya. I'm about to lose my career. Everything I worked for, everything I built, it's all falling apart. Yes, I said simply. It is. Do you feel good about that? Does it make you happy to watch me suffer? I thought about that, really thought about it. No, I said finally. I don't feel good about it, but I don't feel bad about it either. I feel free. For the first time in years, I feel free, because this isn't my problem anymore. This is your problem, and you're going to have to figure out how to fix it or how to live with it on your own. So you're divorcing me. I don't know yet. I'm still deciding. How can you not know? Because, Marcus, I'm not sure I care enough anymore to make the effort of divorcing you. That's how far we've fallen. You're not important enough to me to fight over. You're just nothing. I saw the words land like blows, saw the pain in his eyes. Good. Let him hurt. Let him feel a fraction of what I felt when I heard him tell another woman that she made him feel alive, that I was just a roommate, that our marriage was just logistics. Let him understand what it felt like to be nothing.